2, 3, 4.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Power of Music Thinking. My name is Christoph Zürn, and this is the podcast for people with a musical heart and a wicked job. We're looking for stories, insights and tools from the big world of music to inspire leaders and followers to listen, tune, play and perform in whatever field you're operating. Could smart sound design actually make calling a hospital a less stressful experience? And what if the sound of a cello could be scientifically mapped to our emotions? Now, these are just some of the questions we'll be exploring today with our guest, Caitlyn Trevor. Caitlyn holds a PhD in music theory, a master's in cello performance, and is an award-winning film score composer. As a researcher and UX professional, her work sits at that fascinating intersection of performance, science, and user experience. And just a quick note before we dive in. This podcast is a listener-supported passion project. If you enjoy these conversations and want to help cover the costs of production, you can buy me a virtual coffee at ko-fi.com. That's ko-fi.com/music thinking. There's no obligation, of course, but every single coffee is hugely appreciated. In our chat, we trace Caitlyn's journey from discovering the Lord of the Rings soundtrack to conducting neuroscience research in Switzerland. We'll get into the specifics of how playing music acts as a full body experience for the brain and why she's applying that knowledge to improve everyday sonic experiences. We also discuss her fantastic LinkedIn series, Sound Effects, which shows how sound can drive behavior change. For example, one post reveals how adding a simple warning sound to an e-scooter can cut the number of times it goes unnoticed by pedestrians from a staggering 97% down to just 3%. It's a wonderful conversation packed with insight. Okay, let's get into it. Welcome, Caitlyn. Welcome to the Power of Music Thinking.
Thank you so much for having me.
Caitlyn, what was your first or most memorable sonic experience that had an impact on you?
I remember I was babysitting. This was in maybe 8th grade or so. And this child I was looking after, they had like a little tape recorder on the ground. And I just was, he was playing with blocks. I just like popped it in to see what was on there and I pressed play. And it was the Lord of the Rings soundtrack, which I hadn't seen the movie. I was a little too young. And it blew my mind. It totally blew my mind. And I was like, what is this magic? And because I had never really noticed movie soundtracks before, because it was just part of the experience. And so from then on, I became a huge movie soundtrack fan and was listening to like everything I could find. But it was just such a random happenstance that it was so weird. Like, who has a cassette recording of the Lord of the Rings soundtrack? It's so random, but it was really cool. Yeah.
Well, there was no story. It was only the soundtrack. So you don't know if the kid or girl or boy you were babysitting was aware what it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he must have been. He was an older kid, so maybe he had watched. I don't know. Okay. But it was wild. It just was so captivating. The beginning of that soundtrack it draws you right in. And so I was just like listening to it like, wow, I have got to get more of this music. This is so cool. Yeah.
And that's also beautiful because you enter a new world, let's say, film and all the whole story about it, but you enter it with your ears and not with your eyes. You didn't see a poster and thought, oh, cool film or something.
Yeah, exactly. And so then from then on, I was like collecting CD-ROMs of, any film soundtrack I could find and just listening to them. And I actually do prefer to listen to soundtracks that I have seen the film, because I like to understand the story. It brings me in more. But yeah, the first one I didn't actually know the story. It was just, it's such an amazing score. So it still was really magical. Yeah.
Oh, funny. And also from the quality of a kid cassette recorder.
Yeah, not the best speakers.
Can you remember what kind of sound was it? Was it the overture or what? But it was orchestra, as far as I understand.
Yes, it was orchestra. So I think that was part of the magic, is I hadn't really heard much orchestra, music. My parents didn't listen to classical really, like, in the house. I think there was some Christmas recordings that we listened to that I loved as a kid that did have orchestra. And I think that's part of why I loved them, is because they had this sort of grand quality that I couldn't describe. And yeah, just really captivating. But this was the first time I'd heard like pure orchestra that I can remember. And it was that beginning, which has this really, old world melody that's like da 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 da, and I was just like, what is this? It was just so new to me. Yeah.
Wow. Was it the melody, or was it the whole the timbre from the sound of an orchestra?
Yeah, I think it was the timbre and the fact that there was no voice. So I was really focusing on all these different other sounds that were coming in, and it fades in really gradually and grows. So I was hearing just this blooming of different sounds I hadn't paid attention to before. And it was like, oh, this is, and then I think there is a choir, which I don't think I'd really heard a choir either before. So that was really, other than like church, people singing at church, which is a bit different. Yeah.
Yeah, you may not even know that it's a choir. You just listen to music. You don't think oh, this is all the instruments. You just have the experience. Mm-hmm. So imagine everyone who knows the film and knows the soundtrack, so is now also in that world.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
We had a few episodes back an orchestrator for film. It was really a nice episode, and how he explains how he's orchestrating and also let's say distributing the idea, the melody, and using the timbre for film. So it's a completely different it's a different experience than all the other genres that we know. Nice.
Yeah, fascinating. I have to give that a listen. That sounds great.
Cool. Yeah. Caitlyn, will you tell us a little bit more about you? And you're calling in from Birmingham, right?
Yes, Birmingham, UK. Yep, that's where I live now. I work remotely, so I used to work at the University of Birmingham just a bit, and but before I switched into industry. And yeah, do you mean like, should I say my background and everything, and then?
Yeah,
okay.
Share so that the listener knows who you are. Then they have an idea. They already have an idea because they are linked with a nice soundtrack and a story.
Yeah, sure.
What came out of it? So
yes.
was there a direct line to what you do now?
Actually, in a way, yes. So that was back, 8th grade or so. I was already playing the cello, and I love playing the cello. And that was really how I got into music. Besides, I was playing piano since I was like 5, and I did like piano a lot, but then the cello came in, and that was my main instrument. Totally fell in love with the cello. And then when I heard soundtracks, I really fell in love with those. And my dream at that point was I wanted to be a soundtrack composer. I wanted to compose for film. That was what I was most excited about. So I went to undergrad in music, and I was playing cello and composing. And I then really randomly happened upon a lecture that was about music cognition. And I'd never heard of this before. And it was about the Mozart effect, and how it was actually a really terrible study and, was not true. Like the Mozart effect, it's this belief that if you play babies Mozart music, they'll be smarter. And this is just the study that this myth has been based on was just a terribly designed study and the results mean nothing. But it blew up in the media. And so it became this persistent myth that people believed in for a long time. And maybe a lot of people still do, but it has absolutely no merit.
I think there are also farmers that play music for their cows, or I don't know if it's studied.
Oh,
I heard it
yes.
from people that they do this, and I don't know if they use Mozart or any other composer. But do you know research about this?
I've seen it mostly just on like YouTube. I've seen people playing music for elephants also, and seeing how they engage with it and things. I haven't seen with cows, but I can imagine that, maybe they're looking for a way to improve their quality of life, maybe relax them. Yeah.
Whatever.
But I haven't seen research on that yet. That would be a fun study.
Okay, so the Mozart effect.
Yes. So I saw this presentation, and right after the talk, I went up to this professor who was brand new. I didn't know him. And I said, this is what I want to do. I want to do music cognition. And he was like, okay. And kind of from that day on, he became my mentor. And he helped me get into the grad school he went to at Ohio State, because his mentor was David Huron, this amazing researcher in music cognition, really a legend. And at first I didn't want to go there because I thought, well, I was biased. We went to a conference. It was my first conference in music cognition. It was in Canada, in Toronto. And he was like, you have to go see David Huron speak. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, he's your mentor. You're biased. Like, I just thought he was just like, you have to go see my old teacher. I was like, fine. So I went to go see his talk, and I tried to get into the room, and it was packed. I could barely squeeze in the whole room. It was the most packed I'd seen any room at the conference. I was like, wow, this guy is a big deal. So I squeezed into the back, and as he spoke, I was completely captivated. He was such an amazing storyteller with his research. And like, I just saw how he used research and data to just change everybody's mind about, I don't even remember what the talk was about at all. But what I remember was I was so impressed with his storytelling ability. And I hadn't thought of research that way, that it was storytelling. And so after I saw that, I was like, I really want to work with this man. I want to tell stories like this guy does,
Do you have, you just said you can't remember what it was. I can understand that. But do you have an idea what were the elements of his story, or what made it that everybody was in that room, obviously, and everybody was linked to it? Did he use sound files in his talk, or was it just talking?
He definitely used sound files. Yes. He just had this really almost childlike quality of enthusiasm and excitement that really was contagious as you watch him speak. He was so curious about the world and so genuinely excited to explain things and get to the bottom of these questions. And so he was such a captivating storyteller because he was really good at laying out the whole plot, basically. He would really engage you with the question. You'd be like, wow, what is that? Why do we do that with music? What is that behavior? Why is it there? And then he would say, well, this is how we're going to figure it out. And then just really very well walk you through the methods and the results. And by the end, you were like, wow, he solved the problem. This is amazing. Just very clear communication, really good communicator. Yeah.
Are there any videos on YouTube?
Yeah, I think there are.
So I'll look it up.
Definitely.
Maybe we can also put it into the show notes. That's something like we think, I would stop now and would like to hear more of this.
Yeah, you should. I really recommend it. And he also has some great books. He was a really good writer as well because he's such a good storyteller. So he had this book, Sweet Anticipation, that was really popular and all about music and emotion. Like, how does music make us feel emotions? This was a really big focus of his. So I was so excited to work with him, and I was so honored to be one of his students because he was really a master of this field. Yeah.
And to keep record, this was Ohio?
This was at Ohio State.
Well, you lived in the US then?
Yes, I'm from around Chicago originally, so it wasn't too far a jump to go to Columbus, Ohio, and lived there for, around 5 years where I was working with him. And I was also lucky that the cello professor there was unbelievable as well. Mark Rudolph, phenomenal professor. So I got to work with him and got my master's in cello at the same time, which was really nice that I could do both. So I was still performing a lot. And there was also a fantastic electroacoustic professor there, Marc Anger. And I worked with him a lot in composing. So what I loved about Ohio State is I was able to fire on all cylinders fully. Like I was doing cello to the max, I was composing to the max, and I was researching more than I've ever, I was learning how to research. I didn't know how to research. And so it was just the best place to grow. I got to do everything at once, and it was incredible. It was incredibly stressful and busy, but it was also just amazing. Yeah.
Really, that sounds so special, because when you're, let's say, fixed or focused on an instrument, you want to do everything with the instrument, the whole literature and everything about it. And on the other hand, you learn about what music does. So you're a practitioner and you're the scientist. So, and I can imagine that this could be two different fields where you say, okay, now when I make music, I forget all that rest and already dive into the music. Or maybe you want to combine it. So while you play, if I do a little bit more of this and a little bit less of that, we'll have this effect. Did it work like this, or is it bullshit?
Oh, totally. Yeah. That's what I was so glad I could compose and perform at the same time, because all my research questions came from that experience, Like I had this lesson once with my professor, Mark, and I was playing, and he told me, I think you should move, because sorry, this is a visual demonstration, but I'll describe it with my voice. On the cello, you can play things low towards the scroll with your fingers on a low string, or you can play up towards the bridge the other way around. Low towards the scroll on a high string, or up towards the bridge on a low string to get the same pitch. You can play in different locations on the instrument to get the same pitch. And usually when we decide where to play, because you can decide where to play since there's multiple places to play, this is usually based on logistics, like a choreography of how to get to different places on the instrument as easily as possible, right? Mm-hmm. But there's another component, and that's a musicality. I remember having questions about this because my professor said, I think you should move that up onto a lower string in a higher position. And I was thinking, why? What's this is what David Huron was always prompting me to ask, was why? Because when you do music, you kind of inherit behaviors from your teachers without really questioning, because they're the master and they tell you what to do and you learn. And then you tell someone else how to do it too. So there's these sort of assumptions that have been passed down. And what's fun about music cognition is you get in there and you poke at them and say, why do we do that? What is that about? Why do we describe it that way? And so I asked him, why should I do that? He said, well, if you play there, it'll be more emotional and expressive. And I was like, but why? What is it that makes it more expressive playing there instead of there? And so that led to a whole paper where I was looking into the timbral difference. And when I told David Huron about it, he said, oh, that's a beautiful story. I remember him saying that. I was like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? He's like, it's mimicking the voice. And I said, what is that connection? He said, when we are emotional as human beings, we tend to speak in the upper range of our voice. We start to go up here when we're upset or excited. Right. And what's really, really cool about humans is we can hear where someone is speaking in their vocal range, even if they're a complete stranger. As soon as you hear a voice, you know if they're speaking in high range or low range for their voice, even if you don't know their range. Because of timbre cues, you can tell from the quality of the sound where they're speaking. And this is a really important skill, because if you're a human, it's really important to know the emotional state of a stranger, for safety reasons. And part of us being social creatures, like we need to know how each other are feeling all the time. And so what we're doing on the cello when we move to that lower string in a higher position is you're mimicking that same thing. You're using this upper register cues to convey higher emotionality. At least that was our theory. And I was researching it, and it was part of my dissertation was a study on this. And we found that people were able to hear range on the cello in the similar way to the voice, which was really exciting. But I didn't quite get to the next step of testing if that means it conveys more emotion. But what was cool is I was seeing that in lessons. Like my teachers, my professor said, play in the upper register and it'll be more emotional. I was like, oh. So this is what I loved about music cognition is I got to chase those threads. I got to ask, what is it about that? And actually go find out, which was fun.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's really a great story. And I think even people, when they listen to it, and they also can think about when they see people making music and if they don't like or if they don't go to classical music, because now if you would go to classical music, you could have a look as well to see from, hey, where are they playing? But it also would work, I think, with the guitar or any other string instrument. But talking about the cello, do you know Richard Sennett, the book The Craftsman?
Oh, no. The Craftsman.
It's so funny because he's also a cello player, very good cello player, and he explains things from the outer world, like business or anything else, and any other field, and he explains it. There's also videos about it with the cello. For example, as far as I can remember, he was talking about a certain vibrato if in a certain piece, and if you would do it with your wrist, with the elbow, or with the whole hand, it had a different sound quality, so a different timbre. So it was very interesting, and he then makes the analogy to other fields, like it's not about what you do, I would say, like a melody. It's about how you do that melody and how it works. And that's a little bit what we do at the Power of Music Thinking, finding analogies between the musical world and other things. And very nice. I really like that cello story. Really have to dive into that.
Thanks. That sounds cool. The comparison with vibrato. There are lots of types of vibrato. Yeah, I can see that analogy.
Yeah, you can explain it much better than I am. I think.
Yes, I mean, when we learn cello nowadays, compared to I think in history, because originally vibrato like that. So vibrato, just in case people don't know, it's where you oscillate up and down around the pitch, the main pitch. So you, instead of just going ah, it's like ah, except really fast, so that it becomes just it's, vocalists do it too, right? They have this kind of thing. It's the same thing, vibrato. And what we do nowadays is we try to make it so that it doesn't disturb the pitch. So you still hear the pitch. It used to just be ornamentation. It used to be like adding a trill, like just a note on top. It was the same idea. It was just added as a little ornamentation, just add a little vibrato. But contemporary playing expects you to always use vibrato. And I remember this being a big deal in your cello education, like starting to add vibrato, because when you're younger, you don't add vibrato because you need to learn how to first play the notes, and then once you get more confident in that, they start working on your vibrato, and it's a whole thing. And then as you become a more advanced player, you learn how to change your vibrato for different effects, to slow it down or speed it up. It's about manipulating timbre for emotional effect. So you can do kind of a thin, narrow vibrato or really wide, really dramatic vibrato, depending on what emotion you're going for. Mm-hmm.
And that's funny. It goes with most of the music instruments. If you're a woodwind player, you would do it with your lips, that vibrato, where as a cello player, you do it with the arm or the wrist or the elbow. So, and that gives different qualities of sound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll continue my story. So I was at Ohio State. It was amazing. Loved it. Then I went to Switzerland. I was living in Zurich for a few years, and I was doing neuroscience there. So really a shift for me. I ended up there because I won a Marie Curie grant, which really celebrates interdisciplinary work. So I had pitched to them that I want to continue to research music and emotion, but add neuroscience and learn neuroscience. And they were like, all right, go for it. So that was wild. I mean, I was doing fMRI work, which I was in the basement of this hospital in Switzerland, scanning people's brains, kind of like, how did I get here? But it was really amazing. I got to learn a lot of more of the harder psychology skills like coding, programming, statistics, methods, really work on that side, which I valued a lot because coming from music, I've always had to kind of play catch up on that side of things. Yeah.
When you were scanning the brain of people, I mean, the fMRI, there are studies that musicians have a different brain. Is this also a myth?
No, I wouldn't say so. What's interesting is, our brains adapt in terms of, what skills we're using, right? They're like a muscle. And so I do know there was a really cool study with taxi drivers. They were curious about an area of the brain that related to kind of spatial location abilities.
Yeah.
I can't remember which area of the brain it is. I'm really still pretty not great with neuro, honestly. But I do remember that what was so cool is they decided to look at this population of taxi drivers because taxi drivers really know their area, right? Because they're driving all the time. They know the city so well, much better than the average person who's not driving around all the time, right? So they looked just at the structural difference of that brain compared to someone who doesn't drive around all the time. And they saw that there was that area that was related to spatial, awareness was much bigger in the brain of the taxi drivers than the non-taxi drivers. And so the same thing is happening with music. There's definitely areas that are a bit bigger because they're being used more.
The question why I'm asking is there are many studies like left brain, right brain, and we have to connect the brains. And the thing is, yeah, I think so as well. It's also like if you ambidextrous.
Oh yes, yes.
If you're good with two hands, for example, if you brush your teeth always with your right hand, why not give it a try to do this from now on with a left hand? And in the beginning, it's really strange, but if you do this for longer, your both hands can do something more or less equal. And because our brain helps us to do this better, I think it's let's say in my understanding as not being a scientist, something like, okay, that sounds pretty reasonable.
Yeah. No, I do think what's really special about music is it uses so many areas of your brain at once. And I think any activity that does this is very good for your brain and good for your brain health because it's just exercise. It's the same thing as like in the gym. If there are certain exercises that exercise your whole body compared to one little part, those are better for you. Like swimming, right? Swimming is using your whole body. That's an excellent form of exercise. Music is like swimming for your brain, I think.
The idea to everybody to learn a musical instrument or at least play. It doesn't matter on what level, but to learn also a new instrument. Just trying to learn a new one. It's really fantastic, and I think a great workout.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, it's phenomenal for you, and because it occupies so many different things. Like you have to do physical coordination. You have to do this nonverbal communication. If you're playing with other people, you have to be really observing them visually. You have to be listening to what they're doing. Think about how that's influencing you. You have to focus on the timing of everything that's happening at the same time. And you have to make expressive decisions yourself in the moment and remember how to do that physically. There's a transition between I need to make this more, I need to slow down a little bit, add a little bit of a rubato thing to make this more emotional. And to do that, I have to slow down the bow and make sure I don't run out of bow. There's so many things at the same time and so fast that this is just really incredible for your mind. Yeah, I think.
And it's also linked between, the eye and the finger. So the finger feels and the eye sees. So your brain has to coordinate two different input, how to do this differently. So I think that's also special. And by the way, your example of the taxi driver is, I think nowadays, most of us, including me, we use let's say when we drive electronical equipment, and we just push the button and hear if we have to do right, left, or what else. And
Yes.
often we don't even know the whole area where we are, so it's just more like some kind of autopilot, and we will also lose or don't use different parts of our brain. And if we go further like this, there are also studies the same with the using AI, which can help us in certain parts. But if we start using AI and don't do everything that we did before, we will lose that part. And it's like in the car, if our mobile phone dies down because of the battery is empty, then what would we do? How would we navigate? How would we go from?
It's true. I have been seeing those studies, and it makes me a bit, I love using AI. I think it's a phenomenal tool to use, but I am conscious of that now. I'm like kind of questioning, do I really need to use AI for that? Should I kind of use my brain and, strengthen it and not like forget how to do these things myself? I don't know. It's a tricky balance, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So after Switzerland, I came to Birmingham, where I am now. Yeah. And at first I was lecturing at the university. It worked out really well. The reason we moved here, my husband got offered a professorship in psychology, and then they happened to need somebody for a year to teach music cognition, music and emotion. I was like, wow, that worked out really well. So I did that. They thankfully took me for that position. And it was a nice end to kind of my academic career, because I got to teach everything I was super passionate about. I got to teach music cognition in general. I got to teach music and emotions, specifically, which I love that subject. I got to teach a whole little series on scary film music, which is a passion of mine. So that was really fun.
What's the scariest one?
The scariest one, I think, is Hereditary. This soundtrack is terrifying. It's utterly terrifying.
I don't know.
Hereditary. It's a Ari Aster film. The soundtrack is just unreal. And I showed this film. So I'm a bit of a horror movie buff. And I showed this film in Zurich to some friends. I did like a Halloween horror film festival kind of at my apartment. It was really fun. And I showed this one last, and I warned everyone. I was like, this is really scary. In case, if you don't like scary, then don't come. This film is terrifying. And they were like, everyone came for that film. It was so funny. That was the most popular one. I was like, all right, I warned you. And from the second that film started, the entire room was captivated. And that's because of the soundtrack. The soundtrack is amazing. Yeah. But it's really scary. When I was researching, I focused on scary film music in Zurich. So I was researching this a lot. And I would listen to this music a lot in my office. And then when someone would come to ask, like, hey, you want to go to lunch? I would jump like 3 feet in the air because I was so tense from listening to this music all day long. Yeah, but I got to lecture about that one. That was really fun. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, so I lectured there, and then I had my daughter 2.5 years ago. She's my little bub. And when I had her, I got to take some time off. And I had thought about going to industry for a while because I really wanted to make more of an impact on the world. I didn't like being kind of separated from the world in academia. And I liked my work. I loved researching these questions, but I had this nagging question in my mind, like, how much is this really helping people? How much is this benefiting the world? It's just kind of for you. It's your hobby almost, it's fun, but is it making a difference? I don't know. So I was looking at options, and I found UX research, and I thought, oh, this sounds really interesting, because I liked that it was using psychology to solve problems, to fix things, to make things better, to make them more user-centric and make their experience better. And so I kind of went in that direction. I got my certificate in user experience research to learn more about the methods they do, because it's not completely exactly the same as psychology and academia. And then from there, I kind of started freelancing, working for companies involving sound, because I wanted to marry, my passions and my background with this new field of UX. And what I realized is no one was really doing super sound focused UX. So it was kind of a perfect gap for me. And that's what I'm trying to fill now with my company, Sonic UXR, is I do sound-focused UX research for companies.
Oh, wow. And UX, we have to explain user experience is everything when you interact with a product or a service or anything else. And since maybe 2 or 3 decades, people are really thinking about what people, how people will experience this. So there's a lot of interaction, design on screens, and sound is a very important one. So what would this be? Do you have any examples or cases that we have an idea what UX and UX research in sound means?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the projects I've been doing recently is focused on phone systems. So, anything that's audio counts, really. So when you call, that's all audio. And usually when you call, this is for hospitals specifically. So when you call hospitals or any kind of medical office, really, there's typically a phone tree, right? They say like, thank you for calling the so-and-so medical center. For English, press 1. For Spanish, press 2, or, whatever languages are in the region. And then you have to continue, you press 1 for appointments or whatever. And eventually you usually put on hold, and you might hear music, you might not. And finally someone answers. And usually people dread this experience. I mean, I certainly do. I really hate it.
I think many listeners now say, oh my God, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. They're like, oh, that sounds fun. But I was excited to get this project because I thought, oh, that is a field that needs UX research badly because the experience is awful. And that's what's exciting, is that this research is used to improve that experience. So what I'm doing with this research is trying to help a sonic branding company design a phone tree and on-hold music that is not terrible and is actually helping the user have a more pleasant experience. So that's an exciting question. How can we make this better? And the first step was to do what we call a literature review, which means going out and finding any studies that are relevant to find out what people have already found out, because there's loads of work out there that you maybe just don't know exists. And what's nice about my background is I'm quite used to reading academic papers and digesting them. And what I do for these companies is I find anything relevant and I summarize it in a really accessible way. So I take out all the jargon and make it just, what's the takeaway for each of these papers. And then at the end of that literature review, I write, very specific design recommendations. Like, for example, for IVR systems, that's another word for phone trees, is IVR. So for phone trees, I found that something interesting is you can do an auditory progress bar. I had never heard of this. I thought this is so cool, because one of the frustrations of being on hold is you don't know how long you're going to be on hold. This is so annoying, because if it's like 30 seconds, that's great. If it's an hour, sometimes with cable companies in the US, it could be a long time. Or airports. I feel like airlines, you can be on hold ages. And on the
other hand, it's like, oh, can I grab a coffee? Can I go to the toilet? Can I brush my teeth in that time? Which would be great. But I don't want that moment that you would brush your teeth and someone would say, hello, this is
exactly
he's speaking. What's your then? Oh, you don't hear anything, and then click.
Exactly. So there are 2 solutions that work really well for this. One is telling you your space in the queue. I appreciate this one a lot when they say you are number 25 in the queue. You're like, okay, I have some time, or if they say you're number 1 in the queue, you're probably going to get it. So this is just nice. It gives you a sense of how long. Or if they immediately say, you can press 1 and we'll call you back when we're available. That's also great. People love that. But then there's also this cool auditory progress bar thing. So it's a use of on-hold music to give you a sense of if your turn is coming up. So what you do is you adjust the musical features to give you a sense of anticipation. So as you get closer in the line, maybe the tempo picks up, and then maybe the instruments get a little more excited. I thought this is really nice. It's sort of like watching a progress bar. When you're watching a download bar and it's going up to 100%, it's kind of an audio version of this.
Cool idea.
I thought that was really interesting. I hadn't heard of it. This is what you find in lit reviews, is you find what other great ideas people have had and kind of put them into a summary.
Yes, great idea. By the way, I have a question about the literature literature review, because my students at the moment, they do this too, but they do this with AI. They just first say, hey, AI, this is what I have to do. This is my assignment. Give me some literature. And I realized that sometimes them using literature that is really completely bullshit. And because it doesn't, sometimes it's using the same word. So that's the problem for AI, because they can make a difference. And, what's your take on this? So I think it's hard to summarize a paper. Do you think this would work, or it's a good idea?
It is a great tool, but you have to use it very carefully, very carefully. And so what I will do with AI is I will use it to kind of help me get started. I'll do like a deep research on a question I have and just see what it gives me, like what do you find? But then I chase down every single source carefully, because a lot of times they just pretend. They're like, oh yeah, there's this perfect paper. Here it is. And I'm like, that's not real. That doesn't exist. But it does help me find, a few papers. And then from there, I usually chase those avenues. So what I use a combination, I use some AI, then I go to Google Scholar, then I go to maybe the journal specifically. Google Scholar is actually quite useful in a lot of ways. It has some nice tools. Like if there's a paper you find that is perfect, Google Scholar will have like underneath that paper, related articles or papers that cited this paper. All these things are really helpful. So I use AI sometimes to get started. It can be useful if you maybe give it an abstract and say, can you say this in one sentence? Because you can check that really carefully. You can read that abstract and say, okay, yeah, I like the sentence you came up, or tweak it a little bit. So I think it's nice to give you some brainstorming, give you some places to look and to help you summarize. But when you use AI, you have to check. You can never assume that it's like giving you something true. You always have to check it. So that can slow you down. Sometimes I go back and forth on how much I use it, because sometimes, and I've heard programmers talk about this, like they're getting handed code that's been generated by AI and have to fix it. And sometimes this is way worse than just writing the code themselves, in a good way. It's a kind of the same thing with writing. Sometimes AI gives me something that I'm like, this is going to take me ages to fix. This is crap. I don't want to work with this. So then I would just start myself and just write from the beginning. So, I find it kind of like a collaborator, an unreliable collaborator. So sometimes
unreliable collaborator. Okay, cool.
Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but I always have to check, because it lies all the time. Yeah.
I like that very much. It's like also if you have an old navigation system in your car and you didn't update it for 3 or 4 years. So you get, let's say, the long shot and the directions are good, but sometimes the road is gone or the new road is there or what else.
Exactly.
And you have to be very, you have to really think what it does.
Yes. Sometimes it gives me some hope. It'll say like, I'll be looking into automotive, sounds, and it'll say, oh, there's this great paper on if you use this sound, people will speed less or something. And I look it up and it's not real. I'm like, oh man, you really got my hopes up there.
Oh, really?
So sometimes it's disappointing.
So AI is hallucinating papers.
Yeah, totally. And it's very convincing. So you really have to be careful. Like it'll say there's this paper, it'll have a link also. Then when you click on the link, it'll go to a completely different paper. And you're like, that's not what you said this is. And then, I've even searched for the title, like maybe it just got the wrong link. No, it's just totally pretending that this is the academic paper. It's adjusting it to seem like it's more relevant to what you asked. It's very sophisticated at faking it. Yeah, you have to be careful.
It's faker.
Yes, great faker.
So you need all the skills to really see if it really can help you or not.
Yeah, I mean, that's where, I know a lot of people worry these days, about how future-proof their job is, right? Like how much can AI replace us? And I'm feeling as a researcher, I love it as a tool. It really can speed things up, especially tasks I don't have to worry about it hallucinating. Like when you're running research, you have a lot of admin sometimes. Like if I have to recruit participants, it's nice for AI to help me generate those emails really quickly. Like I need an email that specifies this. I write a list of what needs to be in the email, say generate it. That's great. This stuff is really great. But when it comes to fact checking, and assessing if a study is good quality, because not everything that's published is good quality. You have to see how many participants did they have. If it was 10 people, that's not very reliable, depending on the study design. Sometimes those are fine, but often you want more than that. Or you need to look at the methods and think, is this really a good design? What music did they really use? Is it actually going to be useful in the end? The conclusions. You have to assess if the conclusions are actually based on good study design. AI can't really do this yet. It's lying too much. So I don't know. It's a great tool, but is it going to replace researchers anytime soon? No, I don't think so. Yeah.
You shared with me one case, and maybe we can do this at the end. The one from Japan.
Oh yes, this is from the sound effects series. So yeah, I can tell you about that.
Maybe also talk about the sound effects series. What you do on LinkedIn, that might be also interesting for people if they want to follow up and think, hey, that was interesting. Let's see, or what is there more?
Sure. So I guess I'll bring it back to kind of some of the missions of my company. So what I'm trying to do is help creative companies like Sonic Branding, demonstrate the power of sound, because one of their biggest struggles in getting a client to hire their services is convincing them that sound matters. A lot of companies add sound as an afterthought. They don't really care much about it. But then it ruins the experience, because sound is a really big part of the experience, but it's something that we kind of take for granted. If someone doesn't ask you to really focus on sound, we don't notice it as much unless it's really bothering us or something. And so what's nice about research is you can demonstrate the power of sound with hard numbers, in a way that is really powerful. So the sound effects series came out of that. For me, I'm trying to collect examples of sound design and music influencing behavior in a really measurable way. So one of those is this Japan example. So let me pull it up so I can remember exactly the facts. Basically, the problem was that there was this tunnel in Japan. It was called the Kuwait Tunnel in Tokyo City. And drivers were often speeding in that tunnel. They were exceeding speed limit, and then they were crashing. So there were a lot of crashes at the exit. So they wanted to fix this. This is a serious problem. And what they did, this is really innovative, is they installed a musical road that plays a tune only when vehicles stay within the speed limit of 60 kilometers per hour. So it's this basically ridges on the road, sort of like, they have these on highways to tell you if you're drifting off the highway that just make a sound. They're called, I think, rumble strips. Yeah. It's like this. Sorry?
It's like
yes.
On how many gaps are in that line. Yeah.
Right. So it just tells you, it's a little signal like, oh, you're drifting, get back on the road, which is great. And they took this idea, but they made it into the whole road. So the road had these ridges, but it's sort of like a music box. If you move a music box faster, the pitch can go up or down So the music only makes sense if you drive at the exact speed limit. And so it's kind of a nice way to motivate people to not speed, right? And so they found that after they added that melody, speed fell from 70 kilometers to 63 kilometers per hour, the 85th percentile of speeding. So the fastest drivers slowed down by about 7 kilometers per hour, which is amazing.
Hard facts, absolutely.
Yeah, hard facts, exactly. That is the point of this series, is hard facts showing that sound had an impact. And this is an impact that saves lives. I mean, that's really dramatic and exciting. So yeah, the sound effects series, I'm trying to collect 100 examples. Right now I'm at 17. It's still new. And then this will become a book that I hope people can use to, like, sonic branding companies can have it on hand, and whatever industry they're in. If it's phones, I have examples from phones. I have examples from restaurants, museums, a lot of car sounds, whatever industry they're working in, they can say, we have these examples, they can pull these examples out and really demonstrate the power of sound.
Thank you very much, Caitlyn, for sharing all these stories and all these insights. I will play the tunnel that you just...
Oh, yeah, please say that. Yeah, it's really cool sounding.
that's the end of our conversation. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun to talk with you. And I hope this is interesting for the listeners. Cool.
Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate this because listening is one of the top leadership skills, and I feel honored about this. It is my mission to find, create, and share inspirations for meaningful collaboration based on music analogies. If you want to support this, please subscribe to the podcast, give us a rating, or write a review on iTunes or Spotify. And more inspirations can be found on musicthinking.com. We have a blog, and you can download the Music Thinking Framework. And finally, I would love to hear your feedback. And if you need help with a business challenge, please reach out to me via email, podcast@musicthinking.com.